Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Honey, We're Home. Today, we're just going to jump right into it because we're joined by not one, but two incredible guests. We have Emily Beerley and Jen Chaikin. You two are both licensed marriage and family therapists, aka LMFTs, and hosts of the incredibly popular podcast Shrink Chicks. Jen, welcome to the show. We are so excited to have you.
So excited to be here. Thank you so much.
It is such honor. Now, Nicole, we've known each other for a while.
We have. You've known me since I was an infant.
Since you were, I've known you since you were getting married,
yes.
And now I can't wait to revisit a few years later and talk about all the stuff about marriage and how hard it is.
It's just so funny. Emily came on Betches Brides way back in the day. I'm kidding. I over-exaggerated when I said infant. We haven't actually known each other.
No, but like since your child bride phase.
Exactly. Yeah. You know what I meant. And it's just so funny because that episode was like premarital therapy for me because it was with Emily. She was amazing at it. I just remember my whole world was opened up because you walked us through like your typical premarital questions routine, except in an expedited episode. And it was that was my favorite, most memorable episode from that lifetime. So thank you.
From that lifetime.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And glad to reconnect. So, hey, we're so happy to be here today. This is an honor, and thank you to your audience for listening to us.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so will you guys give us a little background from you? Like, how long have you been therapists? How did you two meet? What sparked the podcast?
Our favorite story.
Yeah.
Emmy, you want to take it away?
So, Jen and I are licensed marriage and family therapists and sex therapists. We met about 12 years ago now in grad school, actually. I walked up to Jen the first day of grad school and I said, I'm going to be your best friend, which isn't that dissimilar to how I walked up to my now husband at a frat party where I said, I'm going to leave unless you give me a reason to stay. And I am big on getting exactly what I want.
Love that.
And so we met in graduate school and I spent 2 years basically begging Jen to start a business with me, in which she was very smart. Like, I don't really know if we should do this. Might be kind of young. And I was like, no, we're going to do this.
Yeah.
And that was 10 years ago. And we now own a therapy practice called The Therapy Group. And we have therapists, we have 40 plus clinicians right now all over the United States, 2 locations in Pennsylvania, Philadelphia, and Westchester, Pennsylvania. And mainly we just love what we do. And so we noticed this thing where like we kept having clients come in and be like, wow, you guys feel really different than other therapists. And I feel like you explain stuff in a different way and you make me laugh. And so we thought, why not put a microphone in front of us?
It was another thing Emily had to convince me to do. You know, I'm just like constantly needing to be convinced to do things. And we started the podcast in 2019, right before the pandemic.
Wow.
And people really needed support during that time. And it was really hard to find. So it's ended up being an incredible journey for us. But yeah, one of the things that we're really passionate about is explaining therapeutic topics in a way that people can actually understand it and it feels relatable.
I remember when you were launching Shrink Chicks in 2019, because that's around the time that we were having you on Betches Brides and stuff. So, I mean, what's been like the biggest takeaway from doing the podcast? Like, is there one big topic or question that you focus on the most or that you've been asked by your audience the most?
Well, it depends what category, right? So if it's around emotions, the number one question everyone asks is, how do I not feel blank?
Okay.
How do I not feel anxious? How do I not feel guilty? And the worst thing we have to say is you're going to feel it.
Yeah.
Right.
So the number one thing we get back to is like, fuck it and feel it. Like just get through, feel through, sit through the distress. And then of course, when it comes to sex, the number one thing is, how do I have more desire?
And this is interesting because obviously we're married and we're focusing on that. And so we often get those types of DMs as well.
Mm-hmm.
And we did open the form for that recently. And I was blown away by the number of responses that were focused around just what you're saying, which is, I love my partner, but like, how do I have more desire towards him? I don't find them unattractive, but I don't want to have sex.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and Caroline like refuses to talk about sex.
Yeah, it freaks me out.
She won't talk about sex
Yeah.
publicly. I'm like, let's talk about
Okay,
it.
My mom listens to every single episode, start to finish.
Which I
There was
hate.
a scenario when Nikki was telling a story about something definitely sex related, and I get a text from John that him and my mom, John's my husband, they're standing in the kitchen watching the episode together. And like, there's just this scene where we're talking about sex and they're just looking at each other. And John's like, I could have had some type of heads up. And so now I'm like scared. I'm like freaked out. I'm like, you do it.
So we should just use Nicole as our examples, and our test subject today is what
it's
you're
good
saying.
to know. Thank you for prepping
Like,
us.
I want Caroline's mom to listen, and I love Caroline's mother. She's a wonderful woman. I've been fortunate to meet her, but I'm also like shit because I sound insane on this podcast.
No.
I did not realize that you guys were sex therapists as well. Since when did that happen? Always?
The whole time.
Always.
The whole time.
The whole time. But I will say this, one of the big reasons that we don't mainly advertise that we're sex therapists is when we were first starting out, we were pretty young in the field, and we would say, oh, we're sex therapists, we have this degree in sex therapy. That's where we met, in a sex therapy program. We would get calls of people basically fetishizing and being like, oh, a sex therapist is a sex worker. And so we started actually having a bunch of creepy things that happened. And we were like, you want to know what? We're just not gonna like actively promote this one, and we'll just tell people what
we say if people ask us questions about it, great. But yeah, at the time when we were building our practice, we didn't really understand how to set boundaries yet. And so we were trying to get clients in, not knowing that maybe like there was some masturbation going on the phone.
Oh no.
So, you know, you live and you learn.
So for all of our gals listening that are predominantly married, can you give us a layman's term breakdown of what is a sex therapist then?
So, okay. So, because we've had this question a million times, well, does that mean that I have to have sex? One time we had someone who come in and said, so when do we take our clothes off? And I was like, literally never.
Yeah.
So what they're talking about in some sense is called a sexual surrogate. So there's something called a sexual surrogate who works, and they're phenomenal practitioners, and they do this unbelievably hard work where they will do physical touch, and they will watch, and they will engage themselves to help teach things. That is not what we do. Those are sexual surrogates. They're amazing people. They're super well trained. It's just not what we do. So once again, we're sex therapists. We're talk therapists. We talk through things specifically like sexual desire, difficulty with libido, difficulty in sexual interest, exploring sexuality, opening up marriages, and then lots of consent and contracting around those things.
And the thing is, as couples therapists, it just is so important to also have that training. Because it's such an integral part of your relationship. So we wanted to be relationship therapists. And the reason why we chose the program we did is because it felt so important to also have that training.
Right.
And a lot of couples therapists are not trained sex therapists. So you actually have a ton of couples therapists that don't have training in sex.
This is so revolutionary. When Mike and we've been meaning to see a couples therapist, just not to nothing's crazy going wrong, which we'll talk about, but just to, prevent anything and just to have better communication, whatever, just to see a couples therapist. And now I'm going to make sure when we do find one, honestly, it's probably going to be one of you two. I don't know if that's a conflict of interest, but both of you at the same time, I don't know, because I'm obsessed with you guys. But when we do find one, I'm going to make sure that they have that training, because like you said,
that's a great tip right off the bat. When looking for a couples therapist,
it goes hand in hand with marital problems. Sex is always related. I think sex makes the world go round, and that's why I always want us to talk about it.
I know. And I do think that it is an important subject, but because we have so many women in their early 30s who are experiencing a decrease in libido, and it's confusing, especially if they've been with their partner. We both met our partners in college. So especially if you've been with someone for a very long time, it's kind of unexpected to say, this has never been a problem for us, and now I have low libido. What do I do?
Right. Okay, so basically everybody's asking, for these long-term relationships, how do we keep the, quote, spark alive?
Yeah.
And before we really delve into that, I want to know, what does that even mean to you guys when we say keep the spark alive? Is that sex life? Is that just
Is that even a healthy way to think about the relationship? Is that, do we rephrase that and say what are some keys you're seeing to successful marriages in today's day and age with all of, we have a plethora of technology and accesses to other types of things, things look different today. How do we engage those things? I mean, when you hear that question, do alarm bells go off, or you're like, this is a normal question and this is a real thing?
Well, the first thing I would say is I think it's important to define what the spark is for you in your relationship. That might be different for everyone. I think that there's a common misconception that keeping the spark alive is getting back to the place that we were in when we first met,
Mm,
which that is an expectation that you will never meet again.
Okay.
And that's a
yep.
Yeah.
really hard pill to swallow for a lot of people. Like, oh, why don't we have as much sex as when we met? Why aren't we having as much fun? Because you are in a completely different place in your lives and in your relationship. So, the first thing I'm going to say about that is that I think it's really important to define what that looks like for you in your relationship. And you can actually have that conversation, right? What
Mhm.
does it feel like for me in our relationship to feel really connected? Is it sex? Is it, going out on dates? Is it we're communicating more? Um, so really define what the spark looks like for you. And I would think about, okay, when is the last time that I felt that way in the relationship? What were we doing? What was different? What was going on? And you might have a plethora of things that come up for you. Maybe we had less stress in our lives. Maybe we had more time to spend together. Maybe we were talking more. And I just want to put it out there that it is very natural to go in and out of connection and disconnection throughout your relationship. So often, when we're in a period of disconnection, we start freaking out
Mhm.
and saying, oh no, right?
Yeah.
We're disconnected. This is bad. We start getting a lot of anxiety and we start to go in these like self
That
protective
just happened. That
behaviors.
literally just happened to us.
Yeah, you
Yes.
said that.
Yeah, this just like literally for the past I want to say like 3 weeks, and then we came out of it like 2 days ago.
Yeah.
So when you were in it, what was going on for you?
And we talked about this a little bit before, like, and I've talked about it with Nicole. I tend to get extreme anxiety, and it's not as bad as it used to be, but I mean, coming from a divorced family, like I go into panic mode. What does this mean? Is this a sign of something? Like, is there something that I don't know about? Do I know all of his thoughts? Like, what is he really feeling? Versus what is he communicating? How can I fix this problem right now? And it used to be super debilitating. Now it's less debilitating, but I do find that like I'm so genuinely in love with my husband that like that is always my home base for everything, like regardless of what's going on outside of the home. Like I love that we have a very safe space with each other at home, and so when that's not good at that moment, even if it
Mhm.
seems like no one did anything wrong,
Mm.
I feel like everything else starts to crumble a little bit.
And that's where like the idea, right? We've been fed almost this lie that we're like supposed to be so connected all the time, and
Yeah.
if we're not at periods of time in our relationship, then something must be horribly wrong.
Right.
But it's natural. It's just part of being in a long-term relationship. And I love what you said, Nicole, about like, oh, we're considering going to couples therapy. We also really want to debunk the myth that you only go to couples therapy when something's really wrong.
Mm.
Actually really helpful to go to couples therapy before something is really wrong. One thing we know is that couples tend to wait way too late to go to couples therapy. And by the time that they get into couples therapy, there's so much that has happened. There's so many wounds that have built up that it's really hard to repair. So, I just to know that that's something that happens in your relationship, that you will go in and out of points of connection and disconnection. It helps to normalize it and hopefully bring your anxiety down during those times to know, okay, how do I bring us back into connection? What does this look like? And the more you do it in your relationship, the easier it's going to be. It's almost like building a muscle.
I mean, I think Jen, you speak to this idea of like we have this idea about how our marriage or long-term relationship is supposed to look, right? And
Mhm.
so when people come in and say like, "Well, I want to get this spark back," I always think about like, okay, we're talking about quality or quantity,
Mm.
because I'll have couples that come in and be like, "Oh, well, the quantity of our sex life went down. When we met in college, we were having sex every other night. Okay, well, also you were going out and drinking, you were having fun, you didn't have to be anywhere the next day, you didn't have a dog crying to be let out to go to the bathroom,
Right.
right? Like there was just like all this different stuff." And so I always ask people is, do you like the sex you're having? How
Right.
is the sex working for you.
Yeah.
Because we have it's really interesting, there's all this research that came out about specifically for women in heterosexual relationships. They have the more often they have sex and still report the least quality of sex. So we do this thing almost like checking it off a list. Okay, well, we had sex 3 times, 2 times this week, so we're doing okay. Well, wait a second, did you like the sex you were having? Did you
Right.
feel connected during that time? Did you get pleasure from it? That's all the stuff that brings spark, because the number one term you can take out of this is that arousal precedes desire. When
Ooh.
you get into your 30s and 40s, you think that you're just going to feel desire all the time, right? And so there's 2 things to look at this. So one is called spontaneous desire. I walk down the street, I see a nice hottie, and I'm
Mhm.
turned on, right?
Right.
That does not actually happen for most of us these
Right.
days. It does happen for me with Jeremy Allen White, I will say that. But for the most part, what we experience is responsive desire, right? I feel
Mhm.
desire in response to something.
Right.
So maybe my partner was really caring that day. Maybe they picked up the dog shit without me having to ask. Maybe they helped my mom out with something that made me feel good, right? There's all this other stuff. And you want it, then I look at my partner, I'm like, man, you are great. You are awesome. And then I feel desire. But for many of us, arousal precedes desire. So I have to remind myself and my body that this actually feels good. And then that makes me desire it. That's recreating the positive feedback loop in our minds.
This is so helpful.
So
That
helpful.
arousal precedes desire. I'm framing that and putting it on our bedroom wall.
I love that.
Would you guys say that like, because I've read things that are like married couples to have a healthy sex life and a healthy life together should be having sex 3 times per week minimum. That is there any sort of like quantity we should be doing, or is it really just like what works for you?
There's no should. I mean, we could give you the average, right? So they say
Yeah.
the average is about like 58 to 60 times a year. So basically that's once a week and some holidays.
Okay.
That's how I'm like, oh, I
Yeah.
guess once a week, right?
Yeah.
So like people say that's on average, but for some folks, right, the here's what we say is that like everything, there's an amazing book by Emily Nagoski called Come As You Are, and she talks about it really, really beautifully, where she says that everything is different and everything is normal.
Yeah.
So if your normal is that you have mind-blowing sex once a month and that's all that works for you in your relationship, that's great.
Yeah.
If you have sex multiple times a week, if you only have sex during certain parts of your cycle, it is whatever works for you in your relationship. But I think all of us are trying to figure out the right
Right.
thing, right?
Right.
So we're like, okay, well, if I do it 2 to 3 times a week, that means we won't get divorced.
And
Right.
like you said, it's really quality over quantity. Like
Mhm.
I've had sex before where it really is a chore, and you're just or I've had the sex where like you really don't want to do it, but then once you start doing it, you're like, oh wait, I forgot why I love this. Like I'm glad we started doing this. But I'd rather have quality sex a little less than like forced sex.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah. Because you want to continue that very positive narrative around it.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
So I have a question. So one thing I know is that intimacy is not always physical. So there's emotional intimacy, and that's something that at least for us, like that's really important, and we spend a lot of time building that muscle. And in periods of disconnect, I find that the intimacy like is missing, and I don't even necessarily mean physical, because you need all of the other forms of intimacy to even want to even want to have sex. So when we get into those, some people might call them a rut, or when we get into that place where like we're not feeling as close with our partner, and maybe we are missing those forms of intimacy that aren't physical, do you have tips? Because I understand that that's normal, but it can be stressful.
One thing that happens is that when we're in these periods of disconnection is that we go into these very like self-protective mechanisms. And what happens is that it actually pushes our partner farther away from us. So in those times when we really want and are desiring some sort of closeness, because we start to feel this anxiety, we start to feel this disconnect, we start to build up these walls in different ways, right? And they look different for everyone. And so the first thing I would say is start with yourself. Ask yourself, what is it that I really need right now? What is it that I'm looking for? Do I need to feel cared about? Do I need more love? And is my partner in the place right now to give that to me? And there's so many reasons why that they might not be in that place, because they're stressed out about work, because they have a lot on their mind. And I think we often have this misconception of like, well, you're my partner, and so you should be able to fulfill this need for me at all times. And the fact of the matter is when you're both stressed out about something or you have a lot going on, there are going to be times in which your partner is unable to give you what you need. And because we have been fed this narrative, we start to feel like, oh, then something's wrong in the relationship. It starts to feel really personal about the relationship or personal to us. And so just to know that there are going to be times in the relationship where you really need to give that to yourself. But to just start with like, what am I looking for? Do I need more love? Is my partner in the place to give that to me? If not, how am I going to give that to myself? What does that look like? How am I going to nurture and take care of myself when I'm feeling really anxious because of the disconnection in my relationship? Because when we keep going to the same source that's unable to give it to us at that time, we keep, maybe continue to feel rejected. We keep not getting what we need. And then the anxiety continues to build. And then the disconnection continues to build. But to be able to talk about the disconnection too, to say like, hey, I know we haven't been connected lately. Like, can we plan a date night? Can we, plan some time to like sit down together? I really miss you. To turn towards your partner, to really start to like bring it to the surface and really look at it, as opposed to falling into those self-protective mechanisms where you're pushing them away.
You mentioned like, stress with work and stuff, and that can kind of lead to closing and becoming really closed off on yourself. What are some of these other things that lead to that disconnection as a couple that you guys see maybe in your practice from your clients?
So, I think you said stress about anything, right? So stress about in-laws, money, even putting sex up on a pedestal. We're not having enough, which should be different. Body image can be huge. How we feel like during, like with that work stress, especially for a lot of men, and work performance. It can be that the house is messy. It can be that the dog is going through something. It can be that, right, we start talking about moms. Oh my goodness, the amount of different things. And then also the mental load and resentment. Two of the biggest desire killers and difficulty with intimacy, both emotional and physical, is resentment and mental load, right? So I feel like I'm always the one who thinks about our plans for the holidays, right? So even even my in-laws, all the women in the family text me and not you. What's up with that?
Right.
And all of that mental load is going to start to take away from our cup, right? So each thing that happens, a little bit more water goes out of that cup till it's totally empty. And then the other thing to think about is that everything happens within that context. So let's say I come home and I had a really great day. I recorded amazing on the podcast. It was beautiful in New York that day. I listened to really great music. My TikTok got a bunch of likes, whatever the fuck it is. And I come home and my partner puts his arms around me.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so nice. It feels so loving, right? Okay, 2 days later, the day was crap. None of the sound worked on the recording. The weather was bad. I got a really rude email for someone I used to work with. I come home and my partner puts those arms around me again. And I think, everything happens in context. Same exact behavior from your partner, two very different responses. And so then your partner's like, huh? I just did the same thing I did 2 days ago. That really worked. That got me laid 2 days ago. What happened here?
Yeah.
And then we start to get very confused because all of that stuff matters a lot of how it affects us.
That's such a key example.
Yes.
This morning, Mike pinched my butt, and normally I like that. It's a cute little flirty thing. I was rushing. I thought this recording was at 10:30, not 10. That's on me. We set this up. I was in such a stressful context. It was raining outside. Louis needed to be taken out. That's our dog. I bit his head off, and he was literally like, what? You normally like that? And I said, that hurt? I shoved him across the bathroom. For some reason, my whole family, which is 3 of us, me, Mike, and Louis, are always in the tiny bathroom at once. I'm like, we have a large apartment. Can we just spread out? I guess my question to all of that would be, how do I prevent biting his head off in situations like that?
It's such a good question. The first thing I have to say is my dog is also named Louis, just a side note.
It's the best. The King
Really?
Louis. Oh my
King Louis.
gosh. I love that. I didn't know that. What kind of dog?
Same. Is it Cavapoo?
Oh, I love a Cavapoo.
What kind of dog is yours?
A mix of a bunch of things. He's 100 pounds and he's a golden lab poodle, German Shepherd, whatever. We rescued him, so it's like a mutt.
So they're a little different, right? But same name.
Yeah.
Great choice. Great choice in dog name.
Exactly.
But such a good question. So I think the first thing to do is ask yourself, well, what's going on for me right now before you jump to react? Because our goal is to first respond before reacting. And sometimes that happens so quickly, right, that we feel we're stressed. And so anything that pokes at that stress, like we're just going to react. So the more you understand what's going on for yourself, the more you're going to be able to respond in those moments to say, Mike, listen, I'm so sorry. I'm really stressed right now. I'm running, like, you can pinch my butt tomorrow when I'm feeling better, when I've had more sleep, when I'm not rushing. And even if you can't catch yourself before it happens, to go back and apologize and acknowledge this is what was going on for me. Because what happens is in those moments, it's easy for your partner to then take it personally.
Right.
They're like, oh, I did something wrong. Like, this is about me. And then it creates disconnection in the relationship.
And so then that builds kind of like
Yes.
Emily is saying until the cup is empty. And now we have to work double time to fill it back up.
Exactly. So the
Okay.
quicker you can catch that and say, listen, I was really stressed. That was not about you. Like, you did nothing wrong. That wasn't about you. I was just had a lot going on. Let's talk later. To really solidify that this was something that was going on with me. This was had nothing to do with you.
Right.
Wow, I like that.
We always say too, it's like during our times of the month, it's good for them to just recognize because we're quicker to bite your head off. But I love that. Like, just communicate.
I do. Okay, so I know that we're talking about even just having the conversation of we have disconnect is huge. One thing that I had to normalize, even for my own, for my relationship within my own anxiety, is that sometimes the conversation has to happen more than once because you can't solve it on the first try. And that used to be a very big stressor for me because if we approach the conversation one time and we say, how can we get out of this place of disconnect? And neither of us have an answer immediately. It's frustrating because then you're like, oh, well, I tried and it didn't work. So, something really must be wrong. And so, normalizing that, let's just continue to honestly check in and revisit this conversation. But then for me, I'm like, in the hopes that at some point, we kind of either eventually tap into what we're really feeling to say what we need, or we just like come up with something that we can do to get out of that rut. Do you have tips for how to have those conversations or how to approach them?
So here's one of the things we know is that if, in theory, marriage is for life is what we're talking about.
Right.
We got a lot of time to figure shit out.
Okay.
And so there was a lot of days that it just doesn't work.
Okay.
There's a lot of, when you do your makeup the same way that you usually when it looks horrible and you're like, what? I do this same thing every day.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's marriage. And then you say, I guess it's going to look better tomorrow.
Right.
And so one word is the term I'm talking about is self-compassion. Can I forgive myself, end this relationship, and be compassionate for what we're going through? I think about it this way. Caroline, how long have you been married for?
3 years.
3 years. Your marriage is a baby.
Yeah.
So developmentally, what do 3-year-olds do? They're figuring stuff out.
Okay.
They're falling. They're learning to talk. They're figuring out where they go in the world, and they have meltdowns because they can't fully figure out how they're feeling, right?
Yes.
So the developmental age of our relationship actually matters.
Wow.
What our relationship has gone through matters. Have we gone through financial debt, issues with in-laws, issues with figuring out religion, moving stuff, right? All of that stuff goes into the developmental age of our relationship. So one, for people listening, I want you to think about what the developmental age of your relationship is.
Okay.
And then what's all the stuff that's happened within it. If it's only 3, well, I have a 5-year-old at home. And let me tell you, when she was 3, we made a lot of mistakes every single day. And so did she.
Yeah.
And then we made it to 5. And I think we're going to make it probably larger than that. But, jury's always out a little bit. Okay. So some of the tips I give you is to be highly aware and then also attunement. Am I aware of how my partner is feeling and am I aware of how I'm feeling? Attunement would come from checking in. Jen talked about before, Jen keeps using this phrase of turning towards your partner. That's what we're talking about, right? So my partner is disconnected. Am I disconnected from myself? Am I disconnected from them? So turning towards and looking at someone else in a situation. When Louis isn't feeling good, what do you notice from him?
He is tired. He lays there. He can't pick his head up. He throws up violently all over my brand new white carpet.
Okay, so you notice something, right? So he gives you these signs. Here's what
Yes.
you should know. You have to know your partner and you have to know yourself. If you do not learn your partner's signs and your signs, you will keep having disconnection.
Okay.
Wow.
That's huge.
How do you learn those signs with a partner who one of you shows a ton of emotion, wears your heart on your sleeve, and the other might be a little more reluctant to show emotion, just asking for a
Hypothetically.
friend?
Happy for friends. It's such a good question, and I would say, is there space created in the relationship for the partner who's more likely to shut down and express and not express those emotions? So often couples fall into this category of like one partner is more expressive, one partner is less expressive. Even Emily and I in our relationship, one partner is less expressive, the other one is more expressive. But the partner who's more expressive, to be able to create that space for the partner who is less likely to express, they have the emotions in there. They're in there. They just haven't had this space, and maybe throughout their entire lives, not just in your relationship. They have not had the space to be able to even understand what they're feeling, to be able to express it. And so sometimes really being able to create that space for them of like, how are you doing? What's going on for you? If you see that they're more shut down, and typically we don't think about shutting down as a reaction. Shutting down is also a reaction.
Right.
So if you're the partner who maybe doesn't express themselves as much, and you find yourself shutting down, it's because you're feeling something. You might not know what you're feeling, but you're reacting to that feeling by shutting down. So if you're the partner that's more expressive, to find deliberate time to create that space for your partner to be able to express themselves. I also think sometimes when we're more expressive, we try to like pull it out of them by like continuing to talk and talk and talk.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
That doesn't
unfortunately-
work for me.
right,
I've tried.
that might
Yeah.
that might shut your partner down more. So really being able to create that space by saying like, tell me what's going on for you, and then doing that 10-second pause, I think might be really helpful. Allowing them to say, and they might not be able to get there immediately. It really might take time.
Right.
Especially if you're married to a man who has been socialized to not be able to understand or
Right.
express their emotions.
Right. Do you recommend like doing this at a certain time of day? I'm really clearly
it's such
turning
a
this
good-
into a therapy
That's
session.
hilarious.
Or like, should we do it in the bedroom, like right before we're about to do it? Or like over a glass of wine with dinner. Is there a best time to have that conversation of like holding that space for your partner?
It's such a good question. It first brings me to like debunking the marriage advice that everyone gives of don't go to bed angry,
Yeah.
because when you're tired, right, and when
It's
you're
the
stressed, it's
worst
the end of it. It's
time to
the
talk about
worst
it.
time to have a conversation.
Yeah.
I think the sentiment of that saying is like, don't sweep things under the rug. Like eventually, which I do agree with,
Yeah.
like eventually you want to talk about it. But when you're tired, when you're hungry, when your resources are lower, don't have the conversation.
Right.
It is so, have you ever, been really mad about something, like everything was affecting you, and then you had a sandwich and you're like, oh, I feel so much
Yeah.
better.
I have had to learn to say, well, John and I both get low blood sugar, and like if we both get it at the same time, it's like you don't want to be near because you can't like breathe right. And I've like had to say, can we talk about this in 45 minutes? Like I need
Yes.
to eat, it needs to hit my system, and then like the other day he made a joke and I just stared at him like I didn't even respond, and he's like, that wasn't funny, and I'm like, it might be in 45 minutes.
Yeah.
Like, but it's not right now.
It's true. It's
And
true.
once again, they were talking about if marriage in theory is for life,
Right.
can I wait 45 minutes?
Yeah, can you wait
Yes.
45
And the
minutes?
thing is, but sometimes if we are the partner who is a little bit more the the term we use in the therapy world is
Yeah.
unbridled self-expression, like you just talk that person is usually underneath that is some anxiety.
And-
Yes.
And so the anxiety is telling you, I have to solve this right
Right
now,
now.
or this relationship's going to fall apart.
Yeah.
We have to be responsible for our own self-soothing. Self-soothing is the word self.
Mm.
It's not for my partner to
Mhm.
soothe me. I need to take responsibility for that. to enter back in. And I think it's really common. Listen, if you are married to like a little bit of like an all-American stereotypical man, some things you can do is bilateral movement and stimulation. So walking and talking together is really good.
Ooh.
Driving in the car where you're not looking at each other is very good. It's also what we do to shut down teens in therapy.
Oh, wow.
Sometimes
Wow.
like the pressure of looking at each other from across the table is a lot.
Yeah, I don't ever bring it up at dinner. I was gonna say when you said that, I if there's some conflict like going on, I will, and he's already acknowledged like he doesn't really know what he feels, or like there's just, I'm like, okay,
That's wild.
I'm gonna just, usually I'll go into the bedroom and be like, I'm gonna go do whatever thing that I was already gonna go do. Will you please like take a few minutes to try and think about it for me, so that when we talk about this later, you know, maybe, and you let me know when you know how you feel, because I want to be able to talk about how you feel, but I know that you don't know how you feel right now. But it would really mean a lot to me if you would take a few minutes to maybe try to think about it. I think that you know, but I can be a little more aggressive because I'm like, we've already been through therapy, and I'm like, and still do it. And I'm like, no, you do know how you feel. You just haven't identified it yet. So you just need a
Yeah.
little bit of time. So maybe don't be aggressive like that. But it works.
But I love what you're saying, like, right? Like, can we have a team huddle?
Yeah.
So, right, like, can we have a partnership huddle? Can we have, I was about to say gangbang, and I'm aware that is not authorized. But just so
Oh,
everyone knows,
yeah.
that is what I'm very sorry to Caroline's mom. I'm very sorry. Right, so we have the team huddle, right? So, like, hey, I want to bring up this thing to you. What's the best time for you today for us to talk this through?
I did that last week
How'd it go?
after therapy. She told me to do this.
Okay.
It went off like I'm like, what? I texted him while he was at work, which to me, I'm like, worst time to do it. And I said, hi, like, I really, you know, this has been on my mind. I really want to talk about this, but I know you've had a stressful day, so I didn't want to bombard you when you came in the door by saying, we've got to talk about this tonight. So I kind of wanted to give you a heads up that you know, like, I feel like we need to talk about it because it was something that was like time imminent. Like, we really did need to. And I'm like, wow, like, just add the stress. If somebody told me we've got to talk about something in 6 hours, I'd be like, no, let's talk about it now. I'm freaking out. Like, what is it? He literally texted back and said, thank you so much for that. Like, I like literally said, wow, thank you so much. I'd love to talk about it later. I really appreciate you kind of giving me a heads up. I was
Heads
shocked.
up.
But
Sounded
you know,
really
it's so funny as you made this thing of like, well, if someone did that to me, I'd freak out.
Freak out.
Men and women.
I know.
So part of this is also that we have been socialized to be such people pleasers. And also with that, because we try to be nice, we often become avoidant.
Okay.
And avoidance is not good in a relationship. But also it's a lot of times it's because we have not been taught really good conflict management skills or honesty,
Yeah.
right? And being really honest about what we're actually thinking and feeling, because we've been taught so much about being nice and adaptable and flexible and pretty
Yeah.
and all the other things that we're often taught as women.
Right.
And so we then project onto our partner, I can't say a hard thing to you because I wouldn't be able to hear this, but how well did your partner take it?
I mean, I literally was like, I've learned something new about you today.
Yeah.
Like, it was
Exactly.
great. Like, I was like, can you save some mental space for me at the end of the day, or some emotional space for me at the end of the day, so we
Yeah.
can talk about it? And in those hours, he figured out how he felt about certain things, so that when we went to go talk about it, he didn't get frustrated or shut down, because he was like, I guess he was prepared, which is a similar approach that I take sometimes. I'll say, I've noticed you're feeling like maybe you're down or these things. I bring it up when it's not an active issue.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
so that he's not heightened.
Smart.
That's smart.
That's another thing I love about that is you're also in a way asking for permission to bring the conversation up. I think sometimes when we hold things in for so long, our partner walks in the door and we're like, oh, finally, I need to get this out.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And we're not creating space to say, like, do you have the space to have this conversation?
Yeah.
And that I think is a skill that we can bring into our relationship, of really asking our partner, do you have the space for this? Can you create space for this,
Right.
to be able to have this conversation? Because when our partner walks in the door, they come home, they, were managing other people all day, whatever was going on for them. And if they're bombarded or they feel something, they may feel overloaded, right? And so their ability to respond without reacting is going to be lower. So it sounds like what you did is you prepped your partner to be able to say, first of all, what am I feeling? You know, what do I want to do going into this? Like they, especially if your partner's like someone who doesn't understand what they're feeling and needs time to understand what they're feeling. That was probably so helpful to create that space for him.
Right.
Yeah.
This is just so magical. I feel like we're both getting a free therapy session. So thank you.
I agree. I'm like feeling great about myself right now.
Yeah. We had a very decent amount of questions from our audience for you guys,
Yeah.
which a lot of them we've definitely covered. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
But before we move on to some of our last segments, because time is flying, I just want to kind of ask some of these, just so we're making sure to get them more rapid fiery. One of the ones we had, really switching gears here, which I'm sure you guys deal with this a lot. What's the best way to handle overbearing or controlling in-laws? How to set boundaries with them?
We get this all the time.
Yes.
And this is
So-
great.
So the number one thing you're going to do is, are you on the same page with your partner? The biggest ways that this becomes a problem is, well, I don't see an issue with what my mom is doing. Really? Because your mom is calling me 10 times a day. So are you and your partner on the same page? Are you being direct? If you're not being direct, what's the reason for that? What's the fear around that? And what would you need for this relationship to be successful? We are in a very unfortunate day and age. The internet says just cut them off. If you've ever been on Reddit, who's the am I the asshole? Like every other response is like, go known contact.
Yeah.
I don't think you should start there. I'm going to be honest. I think you should start with trying.
Yeah.
And so, one, are you and your partner on the same page? Have you tried to solve this issue? Have you tried to actually set a boundary, verbal and nonverbal? And then have you decided what happens from there? So instead of going to an extreme, oh, they're horrible, or I write this story, they're so horrible, have I tried?
You might have to set the boundary over and over and over again. I think it's similarly to like, oh, I already had this conversation. Like, oh, I have to have it again. Same thing with boundaries. You have to set boundaries over and over and over again until it really sets in. And you might have to start small and continue to build the boundary up until you get to that point where you're like, okay, this feels healthy. Like the boundaries between us feel healthy. But I think that can be really frustrating. They're like, well, I set the boundary and she keeps doing it.
Wow. Okay.
Right?
So baby steps and boundaries, build it up slowly over time.
And I think the thing about being on the same page when it comes to in-laws is so key, because we see a lot of questions coming in, like of women being like, should I say something to my husband's mom? She's just super overbearing, whatever. And I don't know about what your guys' thoughts are on this, but I'm always like, get him involved. Like, why is it just between you and the mother? Like, where is your husband? Is your take on that? Should you like make your husband talk to his mom for you, or should you both talk to her, or just you to her? Like, does it depend on the situation?
So listen, if you're in the moment and something happens and you're like, I got to speak up right now, then yeah, don't go wait an hour to talk to your partner to get them involved. If it feels like in this moment, like, hey, okay, so let's say that she's making comments about your body or what you're eating, right? In the moment, hey, please do not comment on my body and what I'm eating.
Okay.
Easy, quick, right?
Right.
Now, if let's say that same mother-in-law is repeatedly like, well, last year you went to Christmas there, or you went to Hanukkah here, or you did this over and over again. Okay, that's a time where I have to bring my partner in. We have to talk a little bit about the expectations and what's happening here. So I think there's situations where it should be dealt with one-on-one between you and your mother-in-law. And I think there's situations that your partner should be involved with. And you're going to have to look a little bit about what's going on. But if there is any type of lack of safety that you feel, and I don't actually mean physical, I mean emotional. Of course, if there's physical, they get the hell out. But like what I mean is emotional, right? Like if she's patronizing to me or condescending, or there's gaslighting happening, then of course I'm always going to want a third person to come in.
Okay.
Your partner is supposed to be on your team.
Yeah.
When you get married, you actually make a new family.
Right.
Yeah.
That's also a hard pill to swallow, I think, for a lot of people, including myself. But I didn't like that. When they told me that, I was like, right. I was like, but there's just another immediate family member. And they're like, no, that's not how it works. And I'm like, no, that's how it works.
Literally, we could talk about in-laws forever. But another question, which I know Caroline's going to perk up with this one, is
which one?
Obviously, we talk about premarital therapy all the time and how important that is. We all know that's important. But We have a lot of audience members that are planning families. Is pre-baby therapy a thing? Caroline swears it
Yes.
is.
Yes.
I've never heard of anyone doing it, but I'm like not getting pregnant until I do it.
God, I love
Smart.
you. Yes.
Okay.
Smart lady. Someone who will have success. Here's why.
I
feel
need
so-
to enroll
Right.
now.
Go to a therapist. It
Okay.
could be helpful with someone who has experience working with new moms, working with new parents, and say, what could help best prepare our relationship for our family change? A baby, even a dog, changes everything. What do we need to talk about beforehand? I do think, this is why read the baby books, read some of them. They're really interesting, but also ask people in your life, what do you wish you knew before you had kids?
Okay.
What do you wish you and your partner had talked about before you had kids? And then talk about those things.
Yeah. Because nothing is wrong. It's just like you don't know what's going to happen because it hasn't happened yet.
Yeah.
You want to be like prepared. You want those tools so that when you need them in your tool belt, you can get them out.
Right.
Ugh.
And it's
We love a prepared lady.
and it's a transition. And in your relationship, anytime you go through a big transition,
Mm-hmm.
it's bound to bring stuff up in your relationship. So it's just another way to look at, okay, I believe that when we have a baby, it's going to bring us closer together. This is so magical, and it is. However, it's also going to be a huge transition in your
Yeah.
relationship. So anytime your relationship goes through a big transition, we always say prepping for it is so helpful to say, like, what questions can we ask? What can we prepare for? Obviously, no matter how much you prepare, there's going to be stuff that comes up. But to be
Yeah.
able to bring those questions to the surface beforehand can be so helpful.
Especially if you are someone who has a history of an eating disorder, a history of trauma, a history of anxiety, depression, or you've had family conflict before that you're worried about it. Those are all really important things. They will absolutely come up again in your journey into parenthood.
All
Mind
of the
blown.
above.
I'm enrolling yesterday. You mentioned books. Is there literally like one book off the top of your head that is a really good one that we should read before trying for a family?
So I think so if you want to go with like the physical stuff, then like what to expect when you're expecting, which is going to talk a little bit more about like the physical changes in your body. I love the shit no one tells you about being pregnant and the shit no one tells you at the beginning, at the very beginning. All of Bed Sheets by Emily Oyster, all of her
Okay.
work, which is like very great to read, and I think it's very helps your anxiety a lot. Those would be things. You can also look at our website at thetherapygroup.com. We have a resource book page of all new parent stuff.
Oh, that's
Obsessed.
great.
On
Yes,
my way.
I'll send you the list, Nicole, after this.
Oh, I love that. Okay,
Amazing.
so we want to read you guys our listener email and get your little elevator pitch advice to her. It's an interesting position because it is not in-law related, but about her own family dynamic shifting after marriage, which is super interesting. So she says, "Hi girlies, I love the pod. My question is, how do we cope with changing family dynamics post marriage? For context, ever since I got married last year, I feel like my mom and I are more distant than ever. She's never been married and doesn't value relationships the way I do. She's all work and no play. I feel like she doesn't know what her place is in my life now that I have a legal document stating my husband is my husband, and I don't know how to help her navigate her because this is all new to me as well. I'm her only daughter, and she knows my husband very well. She even dropped me off to our first date 11 years ago and fully approved of the marriage. Instead of us being able to chat on the phone about lighthearted girly stuff, she's just constantly critiquing my life choices as far as work, housing, roles in my marriage, travel, etc. I'm really just at a loss now because it's at the point where I've asked her so many times to stop being so judgmental, but it continues, and now I just don't enjoy speaking to her, and we speak less now more than ever. Is this normal? What can I do to help her transition? The worst part is she's always wanted to be a grandmother, and I'm 2 months pregnant. And all I want to do is tell her, but we haven't spoken in months. I don't want to brush it all under the rug and put a pretty pregnancy band-aid on it, so I really want us to resolve our issues before telling her. But she's the one with the issues. Any help would be so appreciated.
I love that so much. First of all, Jen, how much do you want to hug this person?
So bad.
I want to hug her so bad, right? So, few things. One, I'm actually interested to know why you don't want to put the pretty pregnancy solution on it, right? Because if mom is shut down and mom is struggling to adapt, but you know that this is something that could open her up, what would be the harm in saying to your mom, I am 2 months pregnant. I just wrote into a freaking podcast of how to do this. I love you and I miss you and I don't know what to do.
Oh.
So come in with complete curiosity. Tell me what's happening here.
Yeah.
I think that there's nothing wrong. I would say this, if you take the first 3 lines of what she wrote in, it was so beautiful. How do I help my mom navigate this? We have different values and ideas.
Yeah.
That's all she's saying, right? This is so beautiful and it's so curious. And the thing is that your mom might not be able to adapt the way you were hoping she would, but also this is new.
Yeah.
What would it be like to give mom a little bit of space and a little bit of benefit of the doubt of what's happening here, while also saying to your mom, you are my mother and I want you and I need you.
Yeah.
You know, we talked about periods of disconnection in our romantic relationship, and we also have that in our familial relationships. And it so often happens once again at these periods of transition. And, you know, for you going through it, for you getting married, you may have thought through, okay, this is what this is going to look like with my husband. This is what's going to look like with my mom. I wonder if maybe your mom didn't go through that for herself. And if she's grieving in a lot of ways, the relationship that she felt she once had, or her idea of what her relationship was going to look like with you. You know, the really tough things about these emails, and we always say this on our podcast too, is that like I have so many questions that I want to ask.
Yeah.
But one of the things I heard is like, I think 2 different times is I want to help my mom through this. And I just wonder how much responsibility this person feels over their mom's experience, their mom's feelings. And I wonder how far back that has gone in their relationship, which says to me that the flow of care might be off, right?
Yeah.
This sense of, I feel this need to take care of my mom, right? And she's really struggling right now.
Wow.
And so I think is another thing to think about is how much responsibility are you putting on yourself for your mom's journey in this? What does this look like for you? And yeah, maybe your relationship is going to change, but it could transform into something beautiful once you work through this, and it might take some time. So I think just also allowing there to be space for the transition to happen. And I love what Emily said. She was talking about being very vulnerable by saying, I love you and I miss you, and here's the relationship I want. And at the same time, I think you can set boundaries with mom. Mom, you know, when you say that thing about my husband, like I really can't talk, like that's not okay. That you can lovingly set boundaries with your mom and build a different type of relationship with her.
I think the key word there is lovingly
Yeah.
set those, because it is
Yeah.
easy to
Yes.
get frustrated. Like she said at some point in the email, like, how do I tell her to not judge me? It's like, go to her. And like you said too, Emily, it's like we go to everybody else sometimes except for the person that we're having that disconnect with. So it's like, if you just go to her, I would go with kindness, with vulnerability, and lovingly just see how you can solve that relationship. And that is such a good point too, about just like the flow of care. Like why
Yeah.
should it be on you to be caring about her this much?
And that,
And I think
it's
for
probably the
some
issue.
folks that have parents that are maybe highly critical, they become parents themselves, and all of a sudden they're like, whoa, why? Like, this is backwards.
Yeah.
And so you might have to say, like, you're about to become a parent. You have to care for someone else now.
Yeah.
You're going to have to redirect your flow of care.
Yeah.
And that's going to start with boundaries. Mom, I actually want you to be involved in this, but here's how it would have to work.
Right. And that is uncomfortable. To your point, the am I the asshole pages, and everyone says cut it off, whatever, move on. And it is such terrible advice, but there is, like, you are allowed to do, you know, what you want to do and what works for you, but it doesn't mean that you have to do it any other way except with kindness. Like, everything you do can be done with kindness. Like,
Yeah.
just because you want to, you know, exclude someone from your life or shut them out or, you know, build a boundary doesn't mean that you have to do it aggressively. Like, those things aren't mutually exclusive. And so I like what you said. Go to her
Yeah.
lovingly, with vulnerability, all of these things.
Yeah, we've built this thing up in our heads where it's like, if we want to be firm and set a boundary, we must be direct and firm. And
Right.
it's like, no, that's why the saying, you kill more bees with honey, or what is it?
Catch more bees.
Oh my God.
I think it's flies.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Because
Okay.
I think the bees and the honey they're making, I think
Yeah.
it's flies.
It's
Kill
Yeah,
flies.
flies.
Bees
That
are
makes
cute.
sense.
Yeah.
You kill bees.
Yeah.
I'm violent. I woke up and chose violence today.
Yeah.
We're going to switch to Love or War real quickly. So, for those of you listening and for you too, this is our little game where basically we give you a couple quick scenarios that would happen in a relationship or that might hopefully never will happen in a relationship. And you tell us if it's absolute war, like an absolute no, if it would cause a war, or love
Like, you
is
kinda
like,
love it.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, like you're
You're
probably
like,
not
it
gonna
doesn't, no,
love
it's like
them.
not that big of a deal.
Yeah, love means it's whatever. It's the name of the
Yeah,
game.
it's the name of the game. Okay, so this one is therapy etiquette edition.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and so we tried to make it on theme. Okay, so the first one, love or war. The first time that you ever see him cry is in a therapy session, but then afterwards he says to you, "I'm so sorry. That'll never happen again."
Oh, love.
Love.
So hug them.
Oh,
Love
that's
so I
cute.
can greet it with love. No, babe, please cry every time.
Yeah, every
Yeah.
single
And
time.
love because he just has a fear of vulnerability, and it
Yeah.
doesn't mean he won't open up again.
Yes.
Aw.
You two go at it
That's
so
sweet.
lovingly.
Yeah.
I was like, war. Why should he?
I know. I was
We
like,
love
I'm
crying men though.
Yes.
We
Yeah,
love
I
crying
love a
men.
crying, but then to afterwards say that won't happen again, I'd be like 2 steps backwards.
Just because
That's-
it was hard.
but
It was uncomfortable for
That's
him.
part of it. So just so you know, if you go to couples therapy and it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back, it is still moving forward.
Yep.
Don't worry about it. This happens.
Great.
Amazing.
Oh, I love that.
So the next one is he says he'll do couples therapy, but won't do individual therapy.
I'm going to say love, and I'll tell you why.
Yes.
Sometimes you can get them into couples therapy, and it will transition into individual therapy.
I would say love because then it makes it a couples therapist job to get him an individual.
Yeah.
No, that.
Put that shit on someone else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I
Love.
love that.
Just get. I tell all my friends that are like, no, they won't. I'm like, just get them to.
Yes.
Yeah.
Just
Get
get
them
in
to
there.
dip it.
Turtle.
Just let them dip their toe in.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Oh,
Like they don't really know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
no
Yeah, we're gonna
offense.
teach you later.
Yeah,
it's
like,
fine.
they
It's
don't
fine.
know.
Just
It's
get
like
them
you
in
don't
there.
even know what you're
Yeah.
saying no to. So like, calm
that's
down.
so
Yeah.
smart though. It transitions.
Okay. All right. So it is kind of war, but like there is a silver lining there.
Yes.
At least they're gonna go to the couples. Okay. Do you want to do the last one?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. So he asks you to switch therapists because the one you guys currently go to is, quote, taking your side more.
Mm.
I know you guys really don't want to say war, but it's
Well, here's the problem is that
It
like
could be happening.
it could right. There's so many like nuances to this, like that
Yeah.
might be happening, right?
Yeah.
And I'm gonna say war, and I'll because you both do need to be comfortable with the therapist. You both need to feel connected to the therapist,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes that takes time. And he's not saying let's stop therapy.
Yeah.
He's saying
Yeah.
let's find a different therapist.
but
Which
what if
that's,
like he really is the issue, and that's any therapist
well,
is gonna take.
then yeah.
Listen, there's a lot of very bad therapists out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like that can happen.
Okay.
You can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know
there's
when
good
Mike and I
ones.
go to couples therapy, the therapist is going to take his side more because he's just more logical than me. I'm like all over the place.
I got called out
Wow.
so hard in premarital therapy. I thought it was gonna be like my side,
No,
and then
I'm
I
gonna
was the issue, and I was like, oh my god.
And I'm fully prepared for
I won't
that.
go on.
Yeah.
My couples therapist said to me a few weeks ago, says to my husband sitting, next to
Yeah.
me, and goes, "Well, if Emily wants to be a victim, let her be."
Oh,
And I was like, I realized that was directed at me, but you did a very good job saying it to him that I heard you say it.
being a therapist for a
He was
therapist
right.
would be the hardest thing
The
ever.
hardest, but
yeah.
being called out by your therapist is like actually a shock to the system because there is nothing you can say back besides like, oh shit.
Yeah.
Smacks you in the face.
Yeah.
Like if they have the balls to do it, then like it's gotta be true.
Yeah. They've been trained, baby. Okay. Do we want to do our last segment, even though we could keep you guys for 12
Yeah.
hours?
So we do icks of the week and turns on of the week, but we're gonna do just a
Good.
turn on this week. And we want to know what your turn on is from couples. What are the things that you can do to keep your partner romantically interested, or a little love language thing to do that might not be obvious, that kind of goes under the rug, taken for granted? What are your tips there?
First thing that comes up for me is just like the little things matter so much more than I know we've been talking a lot about having big conversations and delving deep into things and intimacy, but the little things are really so much more important than we give them credit for. Very small things of like, oh, I'll get you coffee, I'll take the trash out. Like those small things really add up so much more. And vice versa. I mean, if you can think about your own relationship, when your partner does small things, how much does that mean to you?
So, yeah, right. So I think for me, so one other thing is attunement. I see that my partner is very stressed. Instead of asking, the number one thing that happens in relationships is someone will say, well, what can I do for you? Don't ask.
Yeah.
Okay, I see my partner stressed, but I also see there's laundry that hasn't been put away. I'm going to take care of that for them. I see my partner stressed. I'm going to make sure that I see, like, can I rub your shoulders tonight?
Mm-hmm.
So
and that is a turn on. Like that
such
would
a
be
turn on, right?
That
So,
laundry
like,
is a turn on.
Yes.
But taking the initiative
to do
is
Yes.
sexy.
Yes,
Yes.
Right?
That
Do not
builds
make me do
intimacy. Yeah.
don't make me do the emotional labor of asking or telling. See what's happening, look around, and do something.
Yes.
That's sexy.
I
Yes.
love that as a tip because it goes hand in hand to everything we just said,
Mhm.
which is kind of bridging the gap of disconnection before it might even start.
Mm-hmm.
The attunement, all of those things.
Yeah.
Having the intimacy that's emotional and then can turn to physical. And then I love that. I
The
love all
initiative is the best way to like get me horny.
Yeah. It's
Right.
foreplay.
Like, it really is.
Foreplay 100%.
yeah.
Oh
Wow.
my god.
All of those are great. I love those.
Wait, and really quick, do you guys ever, we skipped our ick of the week segment, which
Yeah.
we like get controversial opinions on because our audience is like,
Right,
why
of
do they speak negatively about their husbands? But
And
we,
it's not, it's just men being men.
yeah, like, do you guys hear a lot about icks from
Yeah.
your clients and
Yeah.
stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah,
What
all
is-
the time.
What is the
Awesome.
most like often like small annoyance that you hear? Do you have one that you're like, this is just like so normal at this point? Like it's just
Everyone's just so different.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
It's usually lack of boundaries with their mom.
Oh,
Like a lot of
bingo.
women feel very icked by
we get a
their
lot of
partners.
those.
That's
I
disgusting.
would say that's the most common ick I
A
hear
big ick.
about.
Yeah.
Or people that don't can't stand up to their friends and just
Oh.
laugh about things, right? So like I'll hear this a lot, especially when it comes like my husband was with a group of friends. They were laughing that like women are going to lose the right to birth control, and even though my husband doesn't agree with that, he doesn't stand up or say anything.
Yeah.
So like, not setting boundaries, not sticking up, being a little bit spineless, I think for a lot of people's an ick.
Spinelessness.
Ew.
Ooh.
But then if they have too big of a spine, it's also an ick.
Yeah.
Oh,
It's
that's
like
like
falling,
too much.
falling on one end, right? With not having the balance, right?
Yeah.
Not being able to balance that out, I think is
Yeah.
important.
Well, yeah.
Men can't win.
I was just gonna say
Yeah.
because I feel like women aren't like that's like built into us to like not go too extreme like one or the
Yeah.
other sometimes. So you're like, I don't get why it's not clicking for you.
Women are just more elite, and I'll stand by that. Well, thank you guys so much. I cannot express how much of a favorite episode this is for both of us. I can already tell because Caroline's glowing over here. So am I. I have the chills from this episode. You two are incredible. Where can everybody find your podcast if they don't know already, which they probably do?
Yeah.
And where can they find you?
Yes.
So you can listen to our podcast as Shrink Tricks anywhere you get podcasts. You can follow us on Instagram. But Shrink Tricks is really to educate people about therapy. And if you're looking to start or switch up or move around your therapeutic journey and you're interested in finding a new therapist, we'd love to help you at thetherapygroup.com.
Oh, I
Ooh.
love that.
Can I go to you guys? Is it, or do I have to be in your
Nikki wants
state?
to know.
No, I'm not.
We have
kidding.
people licensed in every state.
Yeah.
Oh,
We have people all over the
yeah.
United States.
on my
Yes.
freaking way. I'm
Yes.
really. This is I've been
Text
so
me, Nicole.
picky.
We'll figure it out.
Yeah,
I really
she's-
will.
yeah.
I've been so picky but
But you should feel validated now because you just said there are
I
a lot
really
of therapists out there that aren't the right fit for you.
yeah, and I can
and it
already
takes
tell.
time. It's like
See?
finding the right therapist is like dating. It
Yes.
takes time.
Or finding a hairstylist.
Or finding
Yeah.
hairstyle. Exactly.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. So one of the things that we're big on is how important the therapeutic relationship is. So take your time. Like if you talk to someone doesn't feel like the right fit, like it's okay to shop around. I know it's exhausting, but we think it's the most important predictor of success in therapy is the relationship that you build with your therapist.
Wow.
Oh, I love that.
I love that. Well, we cannot thank you two enough. You're the best.
Thank you so much.
And
Yes.
Just thank you. We
Yeah,
love
thank
you.
For
We
having
love
us.
you.
Thank
Thank you for coming on, guys, and hopefully we see you again soon.
Yeah, you're coming on like
Please.
once a month.
Yes,
Of course.
yeah.
Yes, we'll be here
Thank you.
anytime you want us. We'll
Anytime you
come.
want. Thank you for reaching out, Nicole. Next time we'll come in
Thank
person.
you.
All right.
Yay.